he started seeing a mandala of all these different faces, like it was Zoroaster, Jesus, Mohammed, you name it, that you, and I'm going to get choked up again, that you are totally loved. You are so unconditionally loved. And I know you may not feel it a lot of times, but we are eternal light beings.
Susan Amsden has spoken with thousands of people with NDE stories, and I believe she is a true expert on near-death experiences. She is the business manager for the International Association of Near-Death Studies and author of NDEs Unveiled, an insider's look into the mysteries of near-death experiences. What do you say to a skeptic about near-death experiences?
Yeah, the first thing I would do is just listen. I would ask them more about it, like what is the stuck point, like where are they feeling like, oh no, this is a no way, I can't believe this, because I learned so much from other people too, from their perspectives. But yeah, I would do that, and I would probably give them some veridical examples. Like we have a veridical example of Pam Reynolds in how she had an aneurysm at the back of her brain, at the bottom of her brain stem, and they knew they could not operate safely. So what they decided to do, and she went to this Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix, which is supposedly, specializes in that. And they decided they were going to do Operation Standstill. And that was where they were going to cool her body down to 60 degrees. They were going to stop her heart. They were going to drain the blood from the brain, and they put earplugs in her ears that were going to emit 100 decibels, 11.3 times per second. Anyways, so they did the surgery, and she left her body. She went out of the body, and she saw that the nurse or the technician had trouble inserting whatever it is they call it into the vein or artery, and that they had to actually switch legs. And so when she had come out of it, she was able to tell them that. And there were a lot of other things she saw too. She described the tool that they used to cut into the skull, looked like a toothbrush, an electric toothbrush. And afterwards, she asked them about it. And here, it's called a Midas Rex bone saw. And it looks a lot like a toothbrush. So there were a lot of things that she knew. Plus, she heard the song that was playing when she was coming back into the body, and it was Hotel California by the Eagles. And she said, oh my God, she thought that was such an insensitive thing to happen, because it was like, you can check out, or you can leave, but you can never check out. So, because here she was having to go back, she was being made to go back into the body. Obviously, it was by her deceased uncle, who actually kind of helped push her in there, but she didn't want to go in at first because it was a cold pool. She knew that's what it was going to feel like. But anyway, she did. She lived, for years after, and that's a veridical example. We also have Eddie Cuomo. He was 9 years old, and he had a really high fever, so he got taken to the hospital, and he was there for, I think it was 36 hours, and trying to get his temperature down. But he crossed over. And when he crossed over, he saw some deceased relatives, and he saw his sister, Teresa. So when they brought him, they were able to bring him back, and he told his parents, who were sitting there at bedside, he said, oh, Mom, and I saw Teresa. And they're like, what? No, Teresa's at college. And they called the college, and here the college had been trying to reach them by phone, but couldn't because they were at the hospital room of Eddie, and she had died in a car accident the night before. And that's how he, so those are veridical examples, like how the parents didn't even know. yet. And they come back with information. So, yeah, that would be how I would start it. Because usually, if things can be proven by other people, then skeptics are more they'll listen to it more. But I don't feel like I have to really convince anybody. I mean, everybody's allowed to their own opinion, and so that's what I would say.
Wow. Yeah, some of those stories were some of the first ones that um, kind of made me really start thinking about life differently, and got me into near death experiences a lot more. One of my favorite stories in your book is of Vicky Noratuk. Can you
Yeah.
tell me what happened to her?
Yeah, and I did just happen to remember, if somebody wants, IANDS publishes a book, and it's called The Self Does Not Die, and we're in our second edition now, but it has 128 cases of veridical evidence. So if somebody, feels like they really need the cases that were proven by third parties or professional researchers or whatever. But yeah, and Vicky Nortuck, she was really interesting too, because she was born blind at birth, and she was a good singer, so she would go sing at this nightclub on a weekend night, and she obviously has to have another driver, so the driver took her there, and she sang, and when she was getting back in the car to come back home, the driver was sort of drunk, and he got in an accident, and so she crossed over. I mean, she was taken to the hospital, but she crossed over, and here she sees, because when she was young, she had to go to a special school for people that had disabilities, and several of her classmates, there were two of them that were very mentally compromised. So when she crosses over, she sees them, and they're like perfect. They're in like their prime, they're like say 20s or 30s. Nothing's wrong with them. They're not mentally compromised. So they are just perfect. And she also saw her grandmother who used to help take care of her.
It's amazing. So, you work with the International Association of Near Death Studies, and you've spoken to thousands of people who have had near death experiences. And in your book, you describe experiencing the benign virus yourself.
Oh, yes.
What is that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps right now. We call them truth goosebumps. And I get choked up at this part. Yeah, the benign virus is what Dr. Ken Ring, one of our co-founders, coined way back when he wrote Lessons from the Light. And because he felt like he caught like some of the same similar after effects that many near-death experiencers have. Like they're no longer afraid of death. They're very humanistic, like they don't care just about the single person in a way. I mean, they care about all of humanity. They're not just going to be discriminatory. So many things. They don't care about money as much. And sometimes to their detriment, they're so giving freely of money. They tend to have more psychic abilities after. Many of them can have some healing abilities come, and some of them actually have spontaneously healed when they came back.
You write about being told future events in your life through dreams as well. Is that part of the benign virus?
It can be for some people, yeah. Now, Karen Schaefer, she was a near-death experiencer, but actually this happened to her before her near-death experience. She was having dreams about, dying in a car accident. And, it bothered her, but, she didn't know what to do about it. She had it again, and then it actually happened to her. And she was in the vehicle, a utility truck. I think they ran a red light. They hit her. And so she goes out of her body, but she sees the utility truck driver get out of his vehicle, go over to her vehicle, turn off her lights, and then go back to his vehicle because he wanted to make it look like it wasn't his fault. And anyways, so yeah, she So she's in the other side, or however you want to describe that other realm, other side. They wanted her to stay, but she wanted to go back because she had a 7-month-old son. And she didn't want anybody else to raise the son. And when she was over on the other side, she realized this other woman was going to become the stepmother. You know, her husband would remarry, and that they would have a couple of children, but that her children would be treated differently. They would not be treated as well. So she argued with her guides and that and said, no, I really want to go back. And they did finally allow it. But before she came back, they had to rearrange everybody's life plans. Because now the woman that was supposed to have become the stepmother was no longer going to do that. Anyway, so I just thought that was very interesting because she was part of that process. But they did tell her, next time when you're going to cross over, you're not going to get a choice. I mean, you need to it's going to be your time for sure. And they asked her how she wanted to go. She says, well, I don't want to go at all. I just want to be out of my body quick. I don't want to feel any pain. And so she knows they decided it was going to be another car accident. And when she was there, she knew when it was going to be. But she said, obviously, they didn't let her come back with that information, which was good. Because she said otherwise she would have kept worrying about it. But,
wow. Yeah. And that all kind of started from, do you think she was trying to be warned about it from her in her dreams?
I think that can be the case. And I actually had some examples, even though I'm not a near-death experiencer, I'm considered a spiritually transformative experiencer through meditation. But yeah, I had 2 dreams that I was going to rear end there was going to be a rear end collision, and it was going to be me. And in one of the scenes, I saw how it looked in the cars. And then in the other one of the dreams, I saw that there was a farm implement off to the side of the road that was going to be somehow involved. But when it actually happened, I was like, oh my God, this is what I dreamt about. But yeah, I do feel, it's kind of, they're trying to give you a warning. This might be coming up. And I wouldn't say that 100% they're always supposed to happen, unless maybe that's in our pre-birth plan, which that's something I've learned from near-death experiencers is, we plan these lives before we come into them. And I do know of some people that have made changes while they're in their life, but so if maybe that rear end collision was supposed to happen, I don't know for sure, but I was picking up a new board member at a hotel that I could not find the entrance to because they put it around the corner. And it just so happened that as I'm in the car after the accident, this new board member is standing on the grass, and he happens to talk to the lady that was in the vehicle ahead of me. And she said he learned from her that was the second rear end accident she'd had in 2 months. So I don't know. I mean, if there's pre-birth planning, who knows what that was all supposed to be about. But anyways, it's very interesting.
You write more about that in your book too, and about soul contracts. Can you tell me more about what that is like?
Well, I mean, I can only tell you from what I hear near-death experiencers say. And it does sound like we definitely have soul contracts. And they're people that we're supposed to specifically meet with and, for whatever interaction we've planned. And I mean, it can either be for some of the friends in our life or maybe some of our frenemies in our life. And like Kim Clark Sharp, she's one of our longest going group leaders in Seattle, Washington. So her group's been going 43 years. And she said when she had her NDE, she was shown these various pictures of different people. And I think they even had like frames around them. And, the person would be smiling at her or whatever. And when she came back into her life, she realized, oh, those are people she's supposed to meet. I mean, it's coming up in the future. So one of them in particular, a woman, she said as soon as she saw the woman, she knew because she'd seen this in her life review, you know, that she, or in her pre-life stuff. And so she was kind of like, oh, you're going to be my friend and stuff like that. But she said it's kind of creeping the lady out, you know. So she had to just kind of cool it until things unfolded and it was actually time. And yeah, she finally won the woman over and they're best friends. So but
That's really
cute.
sweet. That's like
Yeah.
friends soulmates. That's very
Yes.
sweet.
Yeah. And that's why, you know, like when somebody crosses over, there is no judgment. I mean, the judgment is only by us. And so it's not like there's somebody, you know, on a throne with a long white beard judging you. It's all how you felt you did according to whatever specific things you wanted to accomplish that life. Suicides, this is one of the reasons, like if somebody suicides, they're not judged. But they've now altered the contract, all those contracts that are supposed to be coming up in their life, but now they've stunted their life. And so it just, you know, it just changes things and things have to be rearranged and, you know, reset and, or do they choose different people? And yeah, so, but they're not judged. It's all how they judge themselves. And one woman, well, she would want to stay anonymous, and she had been prescribed. I don't recall if they were tranquilizers or whatever, but it was something the doctor prescribed, but he didn't realize that he prescribed a way higher dose. And so, and she had sounds like several years of lingering illness, and they couldn't quite figure out what it was. And so she took them, these pills, and she ended up crossing over. And when she crossed over, she sees herself in line with these other people, and she's trying to kind of communicate with them, but she said they were all so into their own issues or stuff that they didn't even realize, you know, they couldn't hear her. And so then she sees a Hispanic guy coming towards her, and he tells her, she said, you know, why am I here? Or I've tried to talk to these people and they aren't talking to me. And she could communicate with him because apparently he was a guide. And he told her, he said, well, these are suiciders. And she said, well, then why am I in the line? And he said, well, because you weren't taking care of yourself, because she needed to take better care of herself and be more cautious about, you know, taking pills and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, then, and her experience ended up so beautiful. She was like she was out in the galaxies. She saw all these beautiful stars and planets and you name it. I mean, it sounds like the Hubble telescope thing. But she said she saw math. She saw the whole universe is made up of math. And she was just so shocked because math was a topic that she was horrible at in school. Her family kept moving frequently, so she felt like every time she's in a new school, and she was too embarrassed to say that she didn't know how to do the problems. But she said, yeah, now she just loves math. And so she, when we had her come speak at our Tucson and Phoenix groups, she said she wanted to know what our birth dates were because she was all excited about. So now she does numerology, you know, with a lot of people, and yeah, because she feels that there is definitely a lot in that pertains to our universe about math.
That would be, I think, the biggest miracle ever if, like, I came back, it's suddenly able to do math, liked it. That would be, like, the biggest change that could ever come.
Oh, same with her. And I have to say, the other fascinating part to me with her was her parents, well, they were higher up in this particular religion's church. And so I just happened to ask her, I said, so, how do you feel now after your NDE about that religion? And she said, that shoe no longer fits. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's happened to a lot of people I've spoken to. They either kind of find religion and become more involved in it, or they become less involved in it. It seemed to me like it's kind of personal to that person's story. What have you found about
Yes.
that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we find that they'll oftentimes become more spiritual, but less dogmatically religious. Except, we have the case of Howard Storm. I mean, Howard Storm had been a devout atheist or avid atheist, and he was an art professor, and he had taken a whole group of students to France to see, the museums and the statues and stuff like that. And while he's over there, all of a sudden he felt like he's in his hotel room and he felt like he got shot in like the gut. And, he's trying to, doesn't see like a bullet hole in the window, but he was in such severe pain. And it continued and continued. And it turns out that because it was a weekend, French doctors usually take the weekend off. So there were no doctors there to help him. Anyways, yes. So what it was is his duodenum had ruptured, and so the acids in his system were leaking out, and that's what was causing such severe pain. And so he hears his name called, and he starts to follow. So he gets up out of bed and he sees his wife sitting there and she's crying, but he feels like, oh, she's not even realizing I'm here. So he goes to where he hears these voices. He goes out in the hall, and for him, it ended up, his father had been an angry alcoholic, and he also himself was a very angry person. And so he follows these beings out in the hallway, and it keeps getting darker and darker. And then they start not being very nice to him, doing mean things to him, and being full of anger like he had been. And if he tells the story, today, he usually cries at that part, because he said, oh my God, they were beings just like him. They were so full of anger like he had been. So it goes through, some time with that, but then all of a sudden he hears this voice and it tells him to, I'm trying to think what it said, like ask for Jesus. I'd have to look again. And, pray to God. That's what it was. And so he's like, what? I'm an atheist. I don't pray. But he's still very uncomfortable with these angry beings around him. And he heard the voice tell him that again, pray to God. So he starts praying, or he starts trying to think of anything that could sound like a prayer, like God bless America, Jesus loves me, this kind of stuff. And so all of a sudden he sees a pinprick of light way off, and the light starts getting closer and closer and closer to him, and he notices these mean beings are getting further and further away from him. And so in his experience, it was Jesus that picked him up, and he could feel himself healing while he was being held. And then he had a very positive experience. He saw future visions of, Earth, and it was a wonderful experience. So we consider it started out as distressing, but it became a positive, almost heavenly experience then.
I love that you said, like, in this NDE, it was Jesus that came. Before our interview, I asked our subscribers what they would like me to ask you. And one of the questions was, how do NDEs differ between cultures and religions around the world?
Yeah, I found that interesting too, and the surprising thing is very little. They really don't. Sure, maybe it might be how they perceive the being of light, because there is some cultural seep through. But yet we've had, like atheists who saw Jesus. And then we've also had we had a Hindu woman who she saw Jesus. So it just kind of depends. Mellon Thomas Benedict is a fascinating NDE case where he was raised in Catholic schools, but well, of course, when he grew up to be an adult, he just didn't even go with that stuff at all. And he was an artist, stained glass artist, and he found out that he had brain cancer. So he knew he was going to die, and he started checking into all these different religions and trying to learn about, well, what do they say about death? And so when he crossed over, he's starting to go through, they usually go out of body, and then they see a tunnel. And so as he's going through the tunnel, first he says, stop. I want this to stop. I want to ask some questions. And so he was allowed to ask questions. And at some point, he started seeing a mandala of all these different faces, like it was Zoroaster, Jesus, Mohammed, you name it, all of these different things that he had kind of checked out. And he says, tell me, light, why are you showing this to me? And the light said, we're giving you a feedback loop of your own stuff. It's like they were giving him a feedback loop so that he could take a look at it and, have a chance to just observe it. I mean, is this what I really believe? Or, So yeah, his was pretty interesting. Mellon Thomas was spontaneously cured. When he came back into his body after his NDE, there was no evidence of brain cancer. So that was wonderful.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Something I see a lot in our comments that, they're just all so different. But I agree with you, they're not. It seems the core message of it is very similar. And I saw that in the story that you wrote about May, James, and Rashad.
Yeah.
Can you tell me that story?
So May Hewlett, oh my gosh. This is one of they all fascinate me because I feel like I learned something from all of these near-death experiences. But hers especially, I think, tells us a lot about what's going on because she was with her cousin James and a young man from East India, and they were out working the cornfield, and they were cutting fodder or something for the cattle, and so they saw there was a storm coming, but they were trying to finish up and get going, and so James, her cousin, was on top of the truck, on the back of the truck, and May was in between, and so they're reaching down to help Rashad come back up, who was touching the gate, the metal gate. And I hope I have these in the right order here. And so as they touched, lightning struck the gate, and the electricity went through all three of them. So they all three go unconscious, and all of a sudden they find themselves in this dark area. It's black, but they can see out of each other's eyes. And she realizes that James and Rashad, they feel like they're in a King Arthur castle. And she said, yeah, because it was like these really big stones and just huge. They couldn't even see the ceiling. It was so tall and kind of gloomy in there. And, but the two guys thought that was pretty cool, I think. And then they saw some light they could see farther off. And so they all started to travel towards this light. And it was like outside of this, and it was like a beautiful valley. And as they're going there and outside into this beautiful valley, she sees a Viking Valkyrie woman, and the Viking Valkyrie woman tells her that, she's been her guide in their family, because her family tended to be more matriarchal. The women were the power in the family. And then James, he saw his deceased father, who was all dressed up in his naval uniform. And then Rashad saw Buddha. So and Rashad felt like he was in nirvana in there. James felt like he was in heaven. And yeah, she's experiencing this Viking Valkyrie woman. So I think, but yet they all could see what each other was seeing. And so I just think that's a fascinating account of also our abilities of what we can do when we're out of the body. And as just to tell the ending to that. So Rashad was told he's going to die soon, and he said, well, then why are these other two with me? And he was told by Buddha that it was because they loved him so much that they wanted to escort him across to the other side. But and then James found out that he was going to die too, but not as soon as Rashad. So anyways, they all, their bodies are laying in the field, and other cousins saw them laying there and thought, oh my gosh, they ran over, and they had to pry their hands off of May's arms, because James were holding on to May, and then so was Rashad. So then they were, because they said they were floating up above watching the cousins do this, remove hands. And once they were separated, then they were able to come back into each of their own bodies. And so, but that is what happened. Rashad, I think he ended up dying 2 years later, but he went back to India and kind of got his affairs in order, but then lived an ascetic life, like just traveling around. I guess that's more common in India. And then James ended up dying of a brain tumor, which was diagnosed when they checked them out with a lightning strike 3 years later. And then May lived for, I don't know, several decades after.
It's really interesting to see how much NDEs can span, like different cultures, different times. How long have we had recorded examples of near-death and out-of-body experiences?
Oh, yeah, gosh. Probably it goes all the way back to when our bodies could actually die or, supposedly die. It's really an illusion, we find out, But yeah, like Plato, Socrates, they talk about the soldier of Ur, how he was on a funeral pyre, like after a battle. They would just, put them all in this pile, and he was on a funeral pyre, and he suddenly wakes up after many days, and he starts telling them about this amazing experience he had, like heavenly, and how he also saw some past lives. He realized he was there, that he's been going through reincarnations. Yeah, so it's been a long time.
And all of them follow similar steps. Many of them follow similar steps. What do you typically hear about when someone calls into IANDS?
Yeah, oftentimes when they're calling in, they're feeling very, very isolated, because they've tried talking to either the medical professionals and just were told, oh, it's the drugs or something. Or they've tried talking to their family, especially if they were atheists before and now all of a sudden they're super religious or feel like they, really want to go to church or whatever. Yeah, so that's usually what I hear first. Or sometimes it's from a family member who they're recognizing that their, partner had a near-death experience. But that, yeah, yeah, the person themselves who had the experience does not recognize it, but the partner can see how much they've changed after. But yeah, so it's usually, out of the body. I mean, there can be different things that happen. They might see a light being or other beings. They might see deceased relatives. Some of them, like Ray Kinman, he crossed over because his friend, I think he was 10 years old, and his friend said, "Hey, I want to show you this cool judo move." And so he threw him over his shoulder, and instead of Ray landing on his back, he landed on his head. And so he immediately got up and tried to start running for the school, but he collapsed again and hit his head again. But yeah, he happened to see his dog Skippy. That's who, when he crossed over, he saw his dog Skippy. And he was so thrilled. And he had an amazing experience too. There's a great YouTube about Ray there. But one interesting thing that this often happens to experiencers, like his mother said, he told his mother about the experience, but she's like, oh, brain injury can do funny things. And then he goes to, she said, well, I'm going to take you to the priest, the parish priest. So he gets taken there, and the priest starts asking him, well, did you see Jesus? And he's like, no, but I had this wonderful experience. And the priest said, well, if it wasn't Jesus, then it's the devil. And then poor Ray, he was like, God, if the devil is that amazing and creative, he said, there's no hope for me. So he ended up becoming an alcoholic for decades. And but once he found IANDS, it's just wonderful to see how they blossom and are able to get validation for their experience. And that's what happened with him. And he does amazing artwork for like Disney and stuff like that.
Really?
But yeah, but I did want to go back because I realized I wanted to answer this part about the different cultures in that. Alan Kelleher did research on that. And one thing he found out was if it's a very primitive culture, then they usually didn't have a life review because they don't have a feeling of me and mine. They have a feeling of, it's the group. I mean, it's a group identity. So there were differences there. And the other differences were in the Far East, we noticed that they don't necessarily have a tunnel. Like maybe they might go out a window or maybe nothing. Maybe they're just suddenly on the other side. So that's a cultural difference we find too. And actually the tunnels have been used in movies and stuff so much that people think, oh yeah, that's a definite, but not necessarily. It's a smaller percentage that'll have the tunnel, and but that's what movies do for us. They start making us believe certain things. So, anyways,
And do you think it's like people start to internalize it and then it's reflected back when they have their near-death experience?
it could be, except like the term near-death experience didn't come until like Raymond Moody wrote his book, Life After Life. And yet I didn't learn for 40 years, because my mother died when I was a child, that she had a near-death experience. And that was in 1964. And yet my brother said, don't you remember her telling us? But I don't. And he said, well, maybe you weren't there. But he said, she came home because she was bleeding out had been bleeding out both ends, and went to the hospital, and she's floating above her body, looking down at herself, watching the doctors trying to restart her heart. And then all of a sudden it dawned on her, wait a minute, how can I be out of my body looking down at myself? And that's all my brother could remember. He was 13 at the time and I was 9. But see, that couldn't have been from Raymond Moody's book or anything and I'm sure, well, and that really, I was bothered for a long time that she, because of her death. It was a very scary time for me. And a lot happened. And she had been prescribed tranquilizers in the late 50s, which they didn't know were addictive. And then she started drinking alcohol on top of it. But anyway, so yeah, she crosses over, and I just was so fearful of death. I was afraid to go to sleep at night because I asked the adults, well, what does death mean? And they said, I could tell they were fumbling. They didn't know how to answer me. But then finally somebody said, well, it's when you quit breathing. So then I was afraid to go to sleep at night. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to forget to breathe. And anyways, yeah, that's where years later when I started having panic attacks, and oh my gosh, they're scary because you feel like you're going to die and you feel like your body's out of control from what you want. And so there were a lot, and I had also had a miscarriage happen during that time. And I heard my mother's voice, which I hadn't heard her voice that I ever recalled. And I heard her yell at me, Susan, because I was just like frantic or something. And it felt like, there were cracks in our marriage. I had been married about 4 years at that time, and that I didn't want to look at. And so I started going to counseling. There was free counseling offered at a university. And the guy, I think maybe it was about after 6 months or whatever, the guy happened to ask, and he was a student himself, a graduate student, getting his PhD in counseling. And he happened to ask me, so what are you most afraid of happening? And I realized, I had repressed the thought that I would die young like my mother if I had children. And so that's where and once I was able to bring that repressed thought to my conscious mind, the panic attacks went away. And it was just, I was so grateful. Yeah. So, but anyways, then years later, I'm going through or agonizing whether to go through a divorce. And I'd been married 31 years. And I didn't really want to. I mean, I loved my husband very much, but it was obvious we were going in completely different directions. So that's where, and he was atheist, and I wanted to learn more about atheism. So I looked up online, found IANDS was going to have a speaker, and it was going to be Howard Storm. So I was like, I got to see, I got to go hear this guy. So even though I was in Michigan, I drove the 5 hours to Chicago IANDS and heard him speak, and he was phenomenal. And then I felt like I really understood, or, I just had to learn more from the NDEers. And I asked them, I said, well, how can I hear that divine wisdom you guys hear? And how can I feel that unconditional love? And they said, meditation. It was unanimous. They all said meditation was the answer. So I went back, started meditating. After a couple months, I went back to Chicago again because I started going every month then. And I said, well, I'm not hearing anything. And they said, well, did you ask a question? And I was like, oh, duh. I didn't know I was supposed to ask a question in meditation. And so when I went back to Michigan, I heard out of the left side of my head, I hear this male voice when I asked, should I divorce? And the male voice said, do you have a marriage? And at first I got indignant. I was like, well, yes, I've been married 31 years. But then, I had to realize just because you have a signed piece of paper saying you're married doesn't necessarily mean you have a quality marriage. And we had had a great marriage for a lot of years before. But so that was the start. And then I started receiving clairvoyant visions, and I saw 2 police cars. They were zooming past each other with the lights blaring. And I realized, I had to go to a spiritualist minister who many of them have had near-death experiences. And that's what opens them up to get mediumship for people. And I asked her, what does this mean? And she said, well, one car is you, one car is your husband, and you're going 180 degrees, in opposite directions very quickly. So then it was an easier decision for me. And then as I've continued meditating, they told the spiritualist minister recommended you create your own symbol dictionary. So now I've, created that. So I realize whenever something's going to happen, and it's happened a couple other times, when I see a police car and there's certain things about the police car, it's like, uh-oh, caution. And yeah, something's happened after that time. But I think, again, it's not to give us fear. It's to give us just a warning, kind of a heads up, there's something coming up. And yeah, so it was very interesting.
You do have such an interesting story that led you to IANDS work. It's really inspiring to hear how you leaned into meditation, something that I'm trying to do.
Oh,
yeah. And then I love what you say about vehicles kind of representing yourself. I assume that these like dictionaries of symbols, they're different for each person. Is that correct?
Yeah, it definitely could be. Because the other symbol I found out because what I do is I sleep with a notebook next to my bed, because oftentimes right as you're waking up or right as you're going to sleep, for me, it's right when I'm going to sleep, I'll get these quick images, and they're just like maybe 1 second or a couple seconds if it's almost like a video. And so I just write it down. Sometimes I don't know what that means until, later. And like I've had a couple of visions that were like 8.5 months later. All of a sudden I'm living it, and I'm like, oh my God, this was I remembered. So I was able to go back to my journaling, then you can verify for yourself. Yeah. And spiders, for me, I found that spiders, and maybe it's because I'm not crazy about spiders, I found that they mean death for me, like somebody might die, or that there's going to be a severe illness of somebody possibly, and, that type thing. But, and now dogs, I love dogs. I used to work for a veterinarian for a couple of years ago, and dogs, to me, when they are in my images, that means unconditional love, because they just seem so great at it. But anyways, yeah, and and some people get things auditorily more. I tend to get visions, clairvoyant, it's called. Some people just feel things in their body, or like that gut feeling. So there's a lot of different ways people can experience things. And I think a lot of times people dismiss what they get because they think, oh, that's nothing. But I had another minister tell me, he said, jot down everything you get in meditation. So, and that's what really helped me start recognizing, oh, that was something. Oh, I just was dismissing it like, why is that thought in my head? Or, so, yeah. I did just want to say, so I was so hooked going each month to Chicago IANDS. And then I took an early retirement from Michigan, moved to Tucson, and we started with another guy, started Tucson and Phoenix IANDS groups. And then after I did that for 5 years, they hired me, asked if I would come. Well, I came to volunteer just to get out of the Tucson heat one June, and at the main office in Durham, North Carolina. And then they hired me. So yeah, now I'm going on my 10th year there. So,
Wow,
yeah.
that's amazing. And what kind of what kind of things does IANDS provide to people interested in near-death experiences and people who have gone through near-death experiences?
Yeah, well, certainly anybody can call into the office. We'll, either try to give them information ourselves, or we'll connect them with people who maybe had a similar experience or whatever. Yeah, a lot of people are just interested too, because like me, I found out they really help me in my life, like deal with things. Because sometimes you're like, what's happening in the world? What's going on? But yet then you realize, or you'll hear people like Anita Morjani, who cured herself of her cancer, spontaneously. And she'll say everything's working out just fine. It's the tapestry, she just feels like everything's working out fine, which, yeah, a lot of them do. And that the universe really is made of love. And if we turn our focus to love and not to anger or whatever, then we'll start seeing love more and more.
What are the most important lessons people can learn from NDEs?
That you, and I'm going to get choked up again, that you are totally loved. You are so unconditionally loved. And I know you may not feel it a lot of times, but you are. And just ask any experiencer and they'll tell you that. And sometimes we take this life so seriously, and yet experiencers tell us that it's going to go just like that when we cross over, it's going to seem, because we are eternal light beings. And we chose to come and have this experience. And that really can change your perspective, because if you feel like, oh my God, this is such a chore, or this is such a struggle. And then when you start changing your perspective to be like, wait, I pre-planned this life and I chose to have those, like say with my mother dying. Now I have a total different view of that. Now I realize, oh, her and I must have had a soul contract. And, so she was going to check out early. And then, but it was for me, because now look what I'm doing. I'm, helping others with near-death experiences. And so it's like, oh, okay, now it all makes sense. And one of the spiritual teachers I took from Michael Tamura out of California, he said, you're in the job that you prepared your whole life for. So now I understand, because for a while I kept getting accounting jobs, even though I had a science degree. I'm like, why is this happening? And anyways, I end up doing a lot of accounting for IANDS.
It is comforting that all these struggles, all these like really hard times are something that I co-signed to take on, and for the best. So I have to remind myself that sometimes.
Yeah. Oh gosh, we all do. We're all human and stuff. And one NDE, I even heard him say that his guide told him, you don't have to get it perfect. Don't worry about making mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. So just don't feel like, you don't have to get it perfect. But really, in the tapestry of things, everything is happening just as it's meant to be. But so IANDS, we have an annual fall conference, and that's it's going to be August 27th through the 31st. And oh, wow. It's going to be in Chicago. And if you want to know what it feels like to be with a whole bunch of near-death experiencers who they felt the unconditional love, and they're trying to emulate it to everybody else. And we've had so many people say, I don't want to go home after the conference, because it's like the vibration gets so high in love. And and our IANDS president's going to be speaking at a German conference here pretty soon. So there's a lot going on. We have a new executive director. We have a new fundraiser lady who's going to try to help us out. So
it's
lots
so exciting. So it sounds like a really exciting time for IANDS. And for people who want to connect more with you, hear your story, read your book, how can they do that?
You can go to services at IANDS.org, IANDS.org. And I'll try to answer you. My book is available on Amazon. And all of my not the little stickers, but, and all of my proceeds I'm giving back to IANDS. So I've already been able to donate quite a bit of money to them. And so, because I'm so grateful to the near-death experiencers. I feel like they really helped me survive this life.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, Susan, thank you so much for your time, and your book was amazing. I highly recommend it to anyone who is who's watching this. And yeah, I'm just very grateful. So thank you. Thank you so much to Susan Amsden for this incredible conversation. I've linked her book in the description of this video. Now, here's why I was especially interested in what she had to say about dreams. We are thinking about creating an app to help you track, decode, and understand your dreams. And if this is something you would like, let us know by signing up for any app updates. There is a link to sign up in the description. Your interest will determine whether or not we create the app, so if you would like to use this, make sure to sign up. And thank you so much.